I will be creating my own league in NHL 23. That's right, I said screw it to the NHL and decided to create my own. It is going to be called the PHL, the Pasta Hockey League. It's going to have 10 teams, and the greatest players of all time ever in NHL history will play in this league. It is going to be better than the NBA, the NHL, the NFL, the MLB, the CFL, any of those soccer leagues in Europe. The PHL will top that. We are going to have 10 teams in the entire league. Competition will be at an all-time high. First up, we have the Alabama Burger Boys. You knew we had to bring them back. They're going to be playing out of Incest Arena, as always. Next up, we have the Alberta Moose. They're going to be playing out of Berta Arena. Even with all these fires going on in Alberta, they are still going to be playing hockey. Next up, we have the Delta Blacked Raw. And yeah, not much more to say about this. Next up, we have the El Paso Cover Athletes, the Fort Wayne Gremlins, the Loveland All-Stars, playing out of Love Arena, the Regina Swamp Rabbits playing out of Box Arena, the Waterloo Riz, you knew we had to bring it back. They're also going to be playing out of Riz Arena, W Riz, the Yukon Bears, and finally the Ajax Icemen. I gotta be honest, I have no idea where Ajax is at. The Burger Boys have the first pick in the fantasy draft, followed by the Riz, the Icemen, the Moose, the Blacked Raw, the All-Stars, the El Paso Cover Athletes, the Swamp Rabbits, the Gremlins, and finally the Bears. So there's only 10 teams in this league, so that means every single team is going to be very good. We are not going to have any shitty teams in our league. So these are going to be the top 10 draft picks in the fantasy draft. McDavid would go first overall, no surprise there, but Draisaitl went second and Makar went third. For reference, we have all the legends like Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux in this draft, so I have no idea how none of them went in the top 10 at least. So the Ajax Icemen are going to have Jesper Bratt at a 90 overall, Tage Thompson a 92, and Maurice Richard a 94. Their bottom six is not the greatest, but they're very top heavy. Defensively, they have Al McGinnis and Cale Makar. Oh my god, Chikrin and Dougie Hamilton. And they have a 93 Connor Hellebuck in the net. The Alberta Moose are going to have Nathan McKinnon at a 96, Jaromir Jagr at a 94, Bo Horvat 92, Suzuki 87. They're going to have Larry Robinson and Chris Pronger as their top D pair. And they have a 94 Vasi in the net. The Cover Athletes might have the best first line in all of hockey. They have a 91 Stammer, a 97 Wayne Gretzky, and a 94 Tkachuk. They also have the father and son duo that is Matthew and Keith Tkachuk. Their D-core is very good. They have 3 90-plus overalls in Adam Fox, Chris Chelios, and Phil Housley. And they have Ilya Sorokin in the net. The Gremlins are going to have Luke Robitaille at a 92, Mario Lemieux at a 96, Kucherov 94, Solani 93. Their bottom six is not the greatest, but they're very top. Wait a minute, why is there a different Jagr at a 79? Their best defenseman is Victor Hedman at a 95 overall, and they have a 96 Patrick Waugh in the net. The All-Stars are going to have Kaprizov 91, Marcel Dion 92, Elias Pettersson is a 90, so they don't have the greatest of players. They have a lot of new age players, to be honest, in Zegras, Pettersson, and Kaprizov. Defensively, though, they're pretty good. They have Roman Josi at a 93 and Charlie McAvoy at a 94 as their top pair, and they have Jacques Plante in the net. The Black Draw are going to have Jordan Kyrou, Mark Messier, and David Pasternak as their first line. A 93, 94, and 89 is not bad at all. They also have Zabinajad as their second line center at a 92, and Doug Gilmour. Defensively, they have Potvin and Carlson at a 91 and a 90. They also have Miro Heiskanen at a 9. Defensively, they have Dennis Potvin, Erik Karlsson, and Miro Heiskanen, 390 overalls. And they have Igor Shesterkin in the net at a 95. They have Draisaitl, Barkov, Marner as their first line, 95, 92, and a 92. Also have Brett Hall, Dylan Larkin, Johnny Gaudreau, Sidney Crosby, and Bobby Clark. They have a lot, yeah. The Riz have a great forward core. They're absolutely stacked top to bottom. Defensively, they have Ray Bourque and not much else, to be honest. They do have UC Saros at a 91 in the net, though. The Swamp Rabbits have Jason Robertson, Austin Matthews, and Alex Ovechkin as their first line, a 93, 94, and 92. They also have Joe Sakic at a 93. Defensively, they have Paul Coffey, Rasmus Dahlin, Drew Doughty. They also have Linus Ullmark in the net at a 92 overall. John Gibson is their backup. The Yukon Bears are going to have Rantanen at a 93, Forsberg 93, and Gordie Howe at a 95 for their first line. They also have Makita, Hughes, and Nylander, 3 90s on that second line. Defensively, they have Quinn Hughes at a 91 and Adam Pelech 88. The rest is not very good, to be honest. For goalies, they have Brodeur and Logan Thompson, probably the best 1-2 punch in the whole entire league. And finally, the Alabama Burger Boys, they have Artemi Panarin, Connor McDavid, and Timo Meyer as their first line, a 90, 93, and 99 McDavid. Their second line is also very good with a 92, 94, and 89. Brian Trottier is down there as their third line center with a 90 overall. Defensively, they have Nick Lidstrom at a 94 and Alex Pietrangelo at an 89. That is basically it. And they're going to have Glenn Hall and Billy Smith in the net, a 93 and 91 overall. Okay, I retract my statement. This is obviously the best 1-2 punch for goalies in the entire PHL. Now that we know the teams, it is time to simulate and see who will go on to win the Stanley Cup. If you enjoy videos like this, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. We are on our way to 10K subscribers. Why not help us get there? Looking at the standings for the league, the Ajax Icemen finished first in the entire NHL, followed by the Delta Black Raw, the Fort Wayne Gremlins, and the Alberta Moose. Yeah, 4 teams only make the playoffs. I thought it would have been 8 and 2 missed out, but I guess not. So the Burger Boys, the Bears, the Cover Athletes, the Swamp Rabbits, the All-Stars, and the Riz have all missed the playoffs. Very disappointing seasons for them. The Waterloo Riz would finish last place, finishing 29, 45, and 8. Not a terrible record overall. This league is going to be very tight since there's only 10 teams and a lot of talent spread throughout. And you can see it with our best team. They only cracked 102 points and 47 wins. So Wayne Gretzky would lead the entire NHL in points with 106, followed by Mario Lemieux, David Pastrnak, Connor McDavid, Luc Robitaille, Nikita Kucherov, and Steven Stamkos. For goals, Gretzky had the most at 57, followed by Pasta, Lemieux, McDavid, Kyle Connor, and Jesper Bratt. Defensively, Cale Makar would have the most points by any D-man with 82. He only had 7 goals, but 75 assists, followed by Erik Karlsson with 70, Paul Coffey 68, Luke Robinson 66. He was a -12. For goalies, Glenn Hall had the most wins at 38, followed by Shesterkin, Vasi, and Connor Hellebuck. And Igor would have the most shutouts at 3. Nobody had more than 3. Jesus Christ. And this is the year 1 playoff matchups. We have Ajax and Alberta, Delta and Fort Wayne. So starting off, Alberta is going to beat Ajax in 7 games. And the Fort Wayne Gremlins are going to beat the Delta Black Raw in 6 games. And the Alberta Moose would go on to win the Stanley Cup as they beat Fort Wayne in 6 games in the Stanley Cup final. They are the first ever Stanley Cup champions of the PHL. Lemieux would end up having the most points in the playoffs with 18, followed by Nikita Kucherov, Luc Robitaille, Nathan MacKinnon, and Jaromir Jagr. Pastrnak will take home the Ted Lindsay and the Hart Trophy, while Wayne Gretzky is going to take home the Maurice Richard and the Art Ross. Cale Makar would take home the Norris. Matty Beniers would take home the Calder. The Conn Smythe would go to the GOAT, Nathan MacKinnon. Igor would take home the Vezina, and Joe Sakic would win the Selke. So in year number 2, the Swamp Rabbits are going to be the best team in all of hockey with a 48, 30, and 4 record, followed by the Waterloo Riz, the Yukon Bears, and the Fort Wayne Gremlins. So the rest of these teams have missed the playoffs. Oh my god, the Alberta Moose finished dead last in the entire PHL after winning the Stanley Cup last season. That is how competitive our league is. Kucherov would have the most points with 106, followed by Wayne Gretzky 101, Connor McDavid, Mikko Rantanen, and Steven Stamkos. For goals, Gretzky would have the most with 51, followed by Kucherov 50, McKinnon, Pastrnak, Lemieux, Ovechkin, and Rantanen. Paul Coffey would have the most points by any D-man with 84, followed by Quinn Hughes 69, Dennis Potvin 69, Phil Housley 69. Oh my god. Saros would have the most wins by any goalie with 36, followed by Sorokin 34 and Patrick Waugh 34. For shutouts, Linus Allmark would have the most with 4, followed by Connor Hellebuck and Glenn Hall. And here are the year 2 playoff matchups. We have Regina and Fort Wayne and Waterloo and Yukon. For the Stanley Cup final, we have Regina versus Yukon, as Yukon would absolutely dominate Waterloo, sweeping them, and Regina would dominate Fort Wayne in 5 games. So these are clearly the 2 best teams in all of hockey this season. Now we just need to find out who will take home the Stanley Cup. You know what, screw it, I'm gonna rename it. It's gonna be called the Pasta Cup. Screw Stanley, Lord Stanley, it's Lord Pasta, baby. And the Yukon Bears are gonna go on to win the Pasta Cup, beating Regina in 5 games in the Pasta Stanley Cup final. That is a mouthful to say, Jesus Christ. Jason Robertson would actually have the most points in the playoffs with 13. He would also have 10 goals, followed by William Nylander 13, Mikko Rantanen, Jeremy Roenick, and Peter Forsberg. Austin Matthews would take home the Ted Lindsay, the Maurice Richard, and the Hart Trophy, while Connor McDavid would take home the Art Ross. Mo Seider would win the Calder. Cale Makar would take home the Conn Smythe. Igor with another Vezina, and Bergeron would take home the Selke. At the end of year number 3, the Regina Swamp Rabbits are going to lead the entire PHL They would finish their season with 51 wins, 27 losses, 4 overtime losses, the greatest regular season in PHL history already, followed by the Yukon Bears, the Alabama Burger Boys, and the El Paso Cover Athletes. The rest of these teams did not make the playoffs. The Waterloo Riz are the worst team in the PHL yet again, finishing with a 34, 39, and 9 record. McDavid would have the most points in the league with 100, followed by Jason Robertson 99, Nathan McKinnon 95, Panarin 93, Howard Chuck Matthews, Kyle Connor, and Mikko Rantanen. For goals, McDavid would also have the most at 49, followed by Jason Robertson, David Pastrnak, Nathan McKinnon, and Leon Draisaitl. Cale Makar would have the most points by any D-man with 74, followed by Robinson, Ray Bourque, and Quinn Hughes. Linus Ullmark would have the most wins by any goalie with 37, followed by Glenn Hall 36, and Patrick Waugh. Patrick Waugh played 71 games. Marty Brodeur would have the most shutouts in PHL history, 6 in a single season. He's out here breaking records, followed by Patrick Waugh 5 and Igor Shesterkin 4. And our year 3 playoff matchups are set. We have Regina and El Paso, Yukon and Alabama. And for the Pasta Cup final, we have Regina versus Alabama. Regina is trying to go back-to-back, becoming the first ever team to repeat as champions in the PHL. Or will Alabama win their first ever PHL championship? Pasta Cup, Stanley Cup, you can call it whatever you want. And Regina is going to go on to win the Stanley Cup as they sweep Alabama in the Stanley Cup final. It was not even close. They were clearly the better team, and they are the first ever team to go back-to-back in the PHL. McDavid would have the most points for the playoffs with 16, followed by Kyle Connor, Austin Matthews, and Joe Sakic. Matthews yet again takes home the Ted Lindsay, the Maurice Richard, and the Hart Trophy, while yet again Connor McDavid takes home the Art Ross. Makar with his 3rd straight Norris. Cale Makar wins his 2nd Conn Smythe Trophy. Igor wins another Vezina, his 3rd straight, and Bergeron wins his 2nd straight Selke. So the Waterloo Riz at the end of year number 4 are the best team in all of hockey. They finished with a 46, 29, and 7 record. Goddamn, man, Drake would be proud.
Started from the bottom, now we're here.
Followed by the Alberta Moose, the El Paso Cover Athletes, and the Delta Blacked Raw. They would all make the playoffs. The rest of the teams would not. And sorry, but the Ajax Icemen were the worst team in the entire PHL with a 33, 40, and 9 record. David Pastrnak would actually have the most points in the entire league with 100. He also had 64 goals, followed by Panarin, Gordie Howe, Wayne Gretzky, Connor McDavid, and Kaprizov. For goals, Pasta would by far have the most. It was not even close. It was over a 10-goal lead on 2nd place, which was Wayne Gretzky with 48, followed by Lemieux, Kaprizov, and Connor McDavid. Cale Makar would yet again have the most points by any D-man with 84, followed by Ray Bourque, Larry Robertson, and Dennis Potvin. Igor would have the most wins by any goalie with 38, followed by Vasi and UC Saros. And here is our year 4 playoff matchups. We have Waterloo and Delta, Alberta and El Paso. And in the Stanley Cup final, we have the Delta Blacked Raw versus the El Paso Cover Athletes. Now it's time to see who's going to go on to win the Stanley Cup. And the El Paso Cover Athletes are your year 4 Stanley Cup champions as they beat the Delta Blacked Raw Athletes in 6 games in the Stanley Cup final. Gretzky would have the most points in the playoffs with 15, followed by David Pastrnak and Matthew Tkachuk. Pasta would have the best season of all time. He would take home the Ted Lindsay, the Maurice Richard, the Art Ross, and the Hart Trophy. The first player ever to do that in the PHL. Cale Makar with another Norris. Wayne Gretzky would take home the Conn Smythe. Vasi would take home the Vezina, and Wayne Gretzky would take home the Selke. At the end of year number 5, the Delta Blacked Raw Athletes would finish first in the entire PHL with a 44, 31, and 7 record, followed by the Swamp Rabbits, the Yukon Bears, and the El Paso Cover Athletes. Those are the 4 teams in the playoffs. The rest of the teams did not. Man, Alabama has struggled so much. They made the playoffs 1 year and that was it. But the Loveland All-Stars would finish dead last in the PHL with a 37, 40, and 5 record. Gretzky would have the most points in the entire league with 107, followed by Steven Stamkos, who had 102. Mario Lemieux, Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, and Gordie Howe. For goals, Pasta would have the most with 53. Actually, he was tied with Mario Lemieux. They both had 53. Then Nathan McKinnon, 49, Gretzky, McDavid, Jason Robertson, and Matthew Tkachuk. Ray Bourque would have the most points by any defender. He also had 34 goals. 34 goals and 80 points as a defenseman, followed by Cale Makar, Paul Coffey, and Dennis Potvin. Igor would have the most wins by any goalie with 37, followed by Glenn Hall and Linus Ullmark. And Igor would actually have the most shutouts by any goalie. Actually, he was tied. It was a 3-way tie between Igor Shesterkin, Ilya Sorokin, and Linus Ullmark. And these are our year 5 playoff matchups. We have Delta and El Paso, Yukon and Regina, the final 4. Let's see who wins the Stanley Cup. And in the Stanley Cup final, we have the El Paso Cover Athletes versus the Yukon Bears. Will the Cover Athletes repeat as champions, or is Yukon going to win their first ever Stanley Cup? And the Yukon Bears are going to go on to win the Stanley Cup as they sweep the Cover Athletes in the Stanley Cup final. They will win their first ever Stanley Cup in PHL history. Jack Hughes would have the most points in the playoffs with 14, followed by William Nylander and Phil Housley. Matthews yet again takes home the Ted Lindsay, the Maurice Richard, and the Hart Trophy, while Connor McDavid, he would take home the Art Ross. Cale Makar somehow with another Norris, even though Ray Bourque had 30 goals and 80 points. Cale Makar would take home the Conn Smythe, and Bergeron with another Selke Trophy. And that is going to do it for this video, boys. We had the first 5 seasons of PHL history. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see me go 5 more years or maybe even 10 more years and see who really dominates the PHL. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And remember, don't be silly. Wrap your willy.